Imagine, your teeth are falling out one by one, your gums are rotting, and you're chewing on raw rat flesh just to stay alive. You sleep with 50 other men in a damp hold, filled with filth, urine, and the dead. Every morning you wake up, you don't know if you'll die from disease, combat, or the guy next to you stabbing you in the back. That is the real life of a pirate. This isn't Jack Sparrow. It's not One Piece. It is hell floating on the ocean. On average, a pirate lived for 2 years. Not 20, not 10, just 2 years. And in that short time, they lost their teeth, their limbs, their minds, and finally, their lives in agonizing pain. 9 out of 10 died from disease, not heroic combat. They died of diarrhea, malaria, syphilis, or just a lack of vitamin C. You're watching Flow of History. Today, we're tearing down one of the biggest lies Hollywood ever sold you, the romantic pirate. Get ready, because the truth will make you never want to watch Pirates of the Caribbean again. So who would be insane enough to choose this life? The answer? No one. Because Hollywood lied. Pirates weren't volunteers seeking adventure. They were victims. The press gang roamed the ports like a fishing net. They'd grab anyone. A 50-year-old farmer selling wheat, a carpenter looking for work, even a 2-year-old kid stumbling home drunk. One minute you're on the street, the next you're grabbed, black-bagged, and thrown on a ship. Yesterday you were a free man. Today you wake up in darkness, chained in the hold, with no idea where you are. The hold where you sleep? Imagine a deep, dark pit. The air is as thick as mud. The smell of sweat, feces, vomit, and rotting meat all mixed together so thick you have to try to breathe. 50 to 60 men crammed into a space built for 20. You eat, sleep, and piss right there. No privacy, no dignity, just the rawest form of survival. You work 18 hours a day, hauling heavy cables until your hands blister and split open. Climbing a 100-foot mast in a raging storm, where one slip equals a fall into the ocean, and no one is coming to save you. The food? Hardtack biscuits as hard as rock, filled with weevils. You have to bang them on the table to shake the bugs out before you eat. Salted meat, so salty it feels like it's cutting your tongue. Water that's green with algae and tastes like rotten wood. The officers? They treat you like animals. The Caddo 9 tails a whip with 9 knotted cords could strip the skin from your back in 12 lashes. You'd watch a man beaten unconscious, then they'd throw salt water on his wounds to wake him up. The screams echoed for hours. It was a reminder, don't screw up. Then, the pirates appear. The black flag on the horizon. Terror. But when they board, all swinging cutlasses and pistols, you notice something strange. They're organized. The pirate captain speaks to you, almost politely. Anyone who wants to join, we welcome as brothers. Anyone who wants to stay, go ahead. A choice. They give you a choice. Something the Royal Navy never did. You look around. Cruel officers, rotten food, disease, violence. Then you look at the pirates. They split the plunder equally. They elect their captain. They have their own laws. You step over to their ship, not out of bravery, but out of pure desperation. But if you think that's freedom, get ready for the next shock. The pirate ship wasn't freedom. It was a floating prison. Only you had to run it. The deck is slick with salt, tar, blood, and other fluids. One wrong step equals you slip, crack your head on the rail, or fall overboard. No one is diving in to save you. Sharks followed the ships like ghosts, just waiting. Below deck, the devil's den. The ceiling is so low, an average man has to crouch. When the cannons are run out, there's barely room to stand. The smell of gunpowder, rotten wood, bilge water, the stagnant swamp at the bottom of the ship, and the sweat of 60 men who haven't bathed in 3 months. The air is so thick you feel like you're chewing it, not breathing it. Your bed? A hammock strung between 2 cannons if you're lucky. If not, you're on the floor, using a coil of rope as a pillow. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with men who might stab you in your sleep for your boots. The ship is constantly rocking. and you wake up covered in bruises from rolling into your crewmates or the bulkhead. The food? Salt pork as hard as a hammer. Biscuits you have to soak in rum just to chew. A thin gruel made from half-rotten vegetables. The drinking water is green, thick, and slimy. You have to chew it before you swallow. Pirates loved rum not just to get drunk, but because the alcohol killed some of the bacteria in the water. Rats? Your closest allies. They were everywhere, eating your food, gnawing your clothes, sometimes biting you in your sleep. Some pirates welcomed them fresh meat when the rations ran out, and their behavior could warn of an incoming storm. Disease was the real killer. Scurvy made your gums rot and your teeth fall out. Dysentery gave you bloody diarrhea until you wasted away. Typhus, from the lice high fever, rashes, seizures, death. Yellow fever turned your skin yellow and made you vomit black blood. The ship's doctor? An amateur butcher with a bone saw, pliers, and rum for anesthetic. Surgery equals you're held down on the deck while the doctor saws off your limb by candlelight. The survival rate was so low, many men chose to die with the wound rather than let the doctor touch them. The smell of the ship would haunt you for life. Feces, rot, stagnant water, gunpowder, tar, and death. It soaked into your clothes, your hair, your skin. People on land could smell you from 10 meters away and would run. Bathing? A luxury. Fresh water was too precious to waste. Salt water just left you covered in sores. Most pirates accepted filth as part of the job. Only when it rained would they strip naked on deck to wash off the thickest layer of grime. The bilge, the very bottom of the ship, was a toxic swamp. Seawater, urine, vomit, rotten scraps. The fumes could make a man pass out, but someone had to pump it out, or the ship would sink. It was always the new guy, or the guy everyone hated. He'd come back up covered in infections. This is your home. This is where you live. This is where you will die. But before you die, you have to do one thing: kill. And that's when the real hell begins. Real combat isn't like the movies. No heroes. Just screams, blood, and the smell of torn open guts. A cannon fires. The sound is thunder. The iron ball smashes into the ship's hull, and the wood explodes into 1,000 deadly splinters. The man standing next to you is impaled by a shard of wood. His guts spill out. He screams, and screams, and screams, until he can't. The ship shudders. The deck cracks. Men are dying all around you, not heroically, just in agony. The lucky ones die instantly. The unlucky ones lie there for hours, calling for their mothers, for God, for anyone. No one listens. Gunpowder smoke is thick as fog. You can't see 3 feet in front of you. You swing your knife at a shadow. Could be an enemy. Could be a friend. The smell of sulfur burns your throat. The taste of metal fills your mouth. The ships crash together. Grappling hooks fly through the air, digging into the enemy hull, pulling the two ships together like lovers about to kiss. But this is a kiss of death. The pirates board. Daggers flash. Pistols fire. Their faces are twisted with rage. This isn't elegant fencing. This is animalistic. Hacking with hatchets, blasting pistols in faces, biting, scratching, kicking, anything to kill. The first time you kill a man, you discover something inside you, the capacity to be a monster. The barrier of civilization collapses. You stab a stranger, feel the warm blood on your hands, see the terror in his eyes, and you don't stop, because if you stop, you die. The deck is as slick as ice with blood. Every step is a chance to slip, to fall, to have an enemy's knife find your throat. The smell of blood mixes with gunpowder and feces. Men lose control of their bowels in pure terror. The sound of the fight is deafening. Steel on steel clang. Pistols boom. Men screaming. Men growling like animals. Some are silent, their faces tight, focused only on killing. Others howl like demons as they cut men down. The wounded crawl on the deck, dragging trails of blood. Some beg for mercy. Others try to keep fighting, even with mortal wounds. You learn to step over them without stopping. To stop and help equals to die with them. The ship's doctor is working frantically. sawing limbs, cauterizing wounds. The screams from the surgery add another layer of horror. Many men would rather die than live as a cripple, begging in a port. The psychology of that first kill breaks you. You realize the man you just murdered had a family, had hopes. You just stole all of it. Some men break in combat. They just stand still, motionless, an easy kill. Others go mad, attacking even their own crewmates in a frenzy. When the enemy surrenders, some pirates stop. Some don't, still killing in a blood rage. The line between victory and massacre is paper thin. After the battle, the deck is littered with bodies yours and theirs. Blood runs in rivers, down the scuppers, and into the sea. The survivors just stand there, shaking, trying to process what just happened. The ship is scarred, broken rails, torn sails, cannonball holes. You survived. But the feeling is complex. Relief to be alive. Horror at what you've done. Pride in your courage. Disgust at your own capacity for violence. The adrenaline fades. You shake. You vomit. You realize the person who walked into this fight isn't the person who survived. You are changed forever.
The taste of blood is still in your mouth, metallic, bitter, and sour with fear. You will never forget that taste. You've tasted violence, and you found you were good at it.
That discovery changes you in ways you can't even understand yet. But the fight is just the start. The next part is even worse, the plunder. And that's when you see how cruel men can be. Victory brought its own special kind of hell. As the crew descends on the captured ship like vultures, the systematic plunder that follows reveals the pirates' true nature. Not noble heroes, but desperate men driven by greed, cruelty, and the fact that their next meal depended on what they stole. Priority 1. Control the prisoners. The survivors are bound, disarmed, and herded into one spot. The pirates tear through every nook and cranny cabins, cargo holds, any place something could be hidden. Nothing is too small. Buttons, buckles, personal jewelry, all of it stripped away. The cargo hold? It's ripped apart. Barrels are smashed open, sacks are torn, sugar, tobacco, silk, spices, precious metals, all sorted by a professional eye. These men have done this 100 times. Treatment of prisoners? Torture. Officers and passengers were interrogated to reveal hidden valuables. Screams echoed as hot irons, knives, and other implements were used. Women? They faced a double terror, a source of ransom, and targets for depraved desires. The pirate code of honor? Forgotten when there's profit to be made. Dividing the loot? Supposedly democratic. In reality, violent. The captain and officers claimed the most valuable items. The regular crew fought over the scraps. Fistfights broke out over a few coins. The quartermaster tried to keep order, but was often challenged by men who felt cheated. Finding hidden treasure? It took days. Pirates would rip up the decks, tear down walls, and torture the captured crew to find the location of the ship's safe or the captain's private stash. The victims' personal items were passed around like party favors. Clothes, jewelry, weapons, first come, first served. A fine coat or a good sword was worth more than money to a pirate in rags. The psychological impact on the victims, watching their most precious belongings be divided, as devastating as the physical torture. The fate of the captured ship depended on its condition. Fast, well-armed, it joins the pirate fleet. Slow or damaged, stripped bare, then burned or scuttled. The fate of the captured crew varied. Skilled sailors, carpenters, surgeons, forced to join, refuse, torture, marooning on a desert island, or just thrown overboard. The lucky ones were set adrift in a small boat with minimal food. The unlucky ones became victims of the pirate's sadism, tortured and killed for sport, or to make a point. The psychological impact on the pirate crew? Damaging. The euphoria of victory and temporary wealth masked the barbarity for a while. They'd celebrate with drinking, gambling, and violence using rum to stamp out the guilt. The knowledge that they'd just destroyed lives for their own gain ate away at what little humanity they had left. And right after a successful capture, violence often erupted within the crew. The stress of combat plus the high of victory plus captured alcohol fights, duels, and murder. Old grudges surfaced, new conflicts over the loot. The temporary unity of battle dissolved into factional violence. The moral rot was gradual, but unavoidable. Every successful attack made the next one easier to justify. Every act of cruelty made the next one seem less important. Every victim made it easier to see other humans as just sources of profit. The violent plunder came with a hidden cost: the erosion of the pirate's soul, until he became the monster his victims saw in their nightmares. But where did they spend that plunder? That's the real horror. Port Royal, Nassau, Tortuga. The names sound romantic. The reality? A mud-filled sewer where pirates blew their entire fortune in a matter of days. The port's smell hits you before you even see the shore. Rotting fish, human waste, stagnant water, and the sweet smell of corpses left where they fell. The tropical heat amplified it into a wall of stench you could feel. The population? Fugitives, criminals, escaped slaves, army deserters, and runaway debtors. Women were rare and treated like property. Children, if there were any, grew up feral, learning to steal and kill before they could read. The taverns? They were armed camps. Each one was controlled by a different gang. Walk into the wrong one equals instant death. The beer and rum were watered down or cut with things that could blind or poison you. Fights broke out for any reason. The floors were caked in blood that was never cleaned. Gambling? The main entertainment. But the games were rigged. The stakes? Your life. A pirate could lose his entire fortune in one night, then use violence to try and get it back. Cheating was common. Getting caught equals facing the rage of an armed man with nothing left to lose. The brothels? The most depraved part of a port dedicated to depravity. The women were often slaves, prisoners, or desperate souls with no other way to survive. Disease was rampant. Syphilis, gonorrhea, and other STIs spread like wildfire. Many pirates walked out poorer and infected with a disease that would slowly, painfully kill them in the months and years to come. Medical care? More dangerous than the disease. The few doctors were drunks, frauds, or butchers. Surgery was performed without anesthetic, in filthy conditions. The law? Based on violence and personal vendetta. Disputes were settled by duels, brawls, or simple assassination. The strongest man emerged as an unofficial leader, but his power was always temporary. Murder was so common, bodies were just left in the street. The short life and a merry one philosophy was lived to its absolute fullest in the taverns and brothels of these lawless hellscapes. But money couldn't buy the one thing pirates truly needed: safety, because an army was hunting them. As a pirate's reputation grew, so did the determination of civilized nations to hunt, try, and execute them. The romantic idea of the free pirate, beyond the law, a dangerous fantasy. The reality: you are a hunted animal with a price on your head, constantly looking over your shoulder for the Royal Navy, which was closing in with methodical precision. By the early 18th century, pirates went from a tolerated nuisance to a top priority target. The War of Spanish Succession ended, leaving thousands of unemployed, highly trained naval officers and sailors ready for anti-piracy operations. Colonial governors were given broad powers to hunt pirates. Huge bounties were placed on their heads. The force against you? Professional, well-equipped, and absolutely ruthless. Royal Navy frigates and sloops were faster and better armed than most pirate ships. Their crews were disciplined and trained specifically for anti-piracy combat. The intelligence network? Surprisingly sophisticated. Authorities maintained a network of informants inside the pirate ports, offering pardons for information. Captured pirates were tortured to reveal the locations of bases and the names of their comrades. The legal framework was streamlined for one purpose: swift justice and maximum deterrence. Special admiralty courts were set up with one mandatory sentence for piracy: death. Executions were swift and public to make an example. Psychological warfare was key. Captured pirates were publicly tortured, then executed in the most brutal way possible. Their bodies were displayed in iron cages called gibbets, left to rot as a warning. The message was clear: this is the fate that awaits all who choose this life. The daily life of a hunted pirate was dominated by paranoia and fear. Every sail on the horizon could be a Navy ship. Every port could be a trap. Every new crewmate could be a spy. The stress of constant vigilance aged them prematurely. The technological gap was growing. Royal Navy ships had superior cannons, better navigation tools, and better trained crews. Pirates were operating on a budget, forced to use captured or improvised equipment. The king's pardon was a clever psychological tactic. It was a real offer, but it was conditional. Pardoned pirates had to provide information on their old mates, and sometimes actively participate in hunting them. This sowed distrust and paranoia among all pirate crews. The capture of a famous leader like Blackbeard or Black Bart Roberts had a devastating effect. The cult of personality around these captains meant their loss was irreplaceable. The end for most pirates was predictable and grim. Those not killed in battle would eventually be caught, tried, and executed. The life of a hunted pirate was nasty, brutish, and short, with no possibility of a happy ending. But if they were caught, what awaited them was more terrifying than death: public execution. Getting caught wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the show. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Stolen goods on your ship, testimony from victims, confessions extracted through torture, or the promise of a quicker death. The judge wasn't interested in mercy. The death sentence was mandatory. The execution was public. The crowds were bigger than for church. They came for the sick thrill of watching a violent death. Pirates were hanged in groups, their bodies left to swing in the wind as a warning. Some were even hanged in iron cages, gibbets near the harbor, left to rot for months as a living billboard. This is your fate. But some got lucky. William Kidd, a respectable captain before he turned pirate, was hanged in 1701. The rope broke. They hanged him again. It broke again. The third time, it held. The crowd laughed and cheered like it was a play. Some were gibbeted alive, hung in a metal cage to die slowly of thirst, starvation, and exposure. It could take days. Their groans could be heard from a distance. Children were brought by their parents to learn a lesson. Blackbeard? His head was cut off and hung from the bowsprit of the ship. His body was thrown overboard. Legend says his headless corpse swam around the ship 3 times before sinking. Calico Jack Rackham and his crew hanged at Port Royal. His lover and fellow pirate, Anne Bonny, visited him in prison. Her last words: "Sorry to see you here. If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." She was pregnant, so she was spared the gallows. He wasn't. Charles Vane, a notoriously cruel pirate, was hung in chains in a gibbet on a small island in Jamaica. He was left to rot for years. His bones were still rattling in the rusted cage decades later. The message? Pirates didn't die as heroes. They died as criminals. Slowly, painfully, humiliatingly. Their families? Stripped of property, exiled. Their children stigmatized for life. The punishment didn't stop with the individual. It spread like a plague. But for the few who survived, life wasn't much better. A few pirates survived, but they didn't really live. Former pirates were identifiable by their scars, missing limbs, and a certain way of talking. They were shunned by respectable society, unable to find legal work. A pardon from the governor? It was conditional and temporary, subject to being revoked if they were even suspected of returning to their old ways. Many who tried to retire were arrested years after they left the life. Their past caught up with them when they least expected it. The physical damage continued to claim its victims long after they left the sea. Former pirates died young from the diseases they'd contracted, the injuries they'd sustained, and the cumulative damage of years of hardship. The death was usually lonely and unmourned. The psychological damage was incurable. Former pirates struggled with nightmares, paranoia, and violent impulses that made it impossible to function in civilized society. Many turned to alcohol or other substances to numb the pain, accelerating their physical decline. The few pirates who did accumulate significant wealth found that it was useless. The money couldn't buy back their health, their sanity, or their place in respectable society. They died as outcasts, their treasure unable to buy the one thing they truly needed: redemption. The golden age of piracy ended, not with a final heroic battle, but with a whimper, as the last survivors of a brutal era were hunted down and exterminated like the vermin they had become. The seas that were once their highway to freedom had become their graveyard, and the black flag that once struck terror in the hearts of sailors would fly no more. So there it is, the brutal life of a pirate. From the moment that first desperate man stepped onto a pirate ship to the day his certain death claimed him, we've seen how the romantic myth of piracy crumbles under the weight of historical reality. These weren't swashbuckling heroes living a life of adventure and freedom. They were broken men, trapped in a cycle of violence, disease, and moral decay that consumed everything it touched. The pirates of the Golden Age lived short, brutal lives marked by constant suffering and the knowledge that their choices had cut them off from everything that makes life worth living. They traded their humanity for temporary riches and found the bargain left them poorer than the honest sailors they once were. Their ships were floating hells. Their ports were cesspools of corruption. Their brotherhood was built more on mutual fear than true loyalty. The diseases that ravaged their bodies were matched only by the madness that consumed their minds, as years of violence and isolation stripped away any sanity they once possessed. They died as they lived, violently, miserably, and largely unmourned by a world that was better off without them. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep in your comfortable bed, maybe spare a thought for these forgotten souls. Their story is a reminder that freedom without responsibility is just another form of slavery, and those who live by the sword will, without fail, die by it. If this video made you rethink the true cost of a lawless freedom, hit like, share, and subscribe to Flow of History, where we tear down the historical myths Hollywood never dares to tell. Comment below, do you honestly think you would have survived the real pirate life? Be honest. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next dark journey through history. Remember, the flow of history never stops, and the truth is always more brutal than the legend. Stay curious, stay critical, stay human.